All right, and we're live. We're about 11 minutes late, but it's all right. We're here. I see we have a couple people waiting in the comments, so I appreciate you guys who showed up on time. That shows some dedication. But I'm super excited for today's interview. It's been a little bit over a week since the last interview, so a little bit of a break, but I'm excited to be back today. I have my guy, Matt Pugh, here with me. Matt, what's going on?
Hey, what's going on, Tommy? Thanks for having me, man. I appreciate this. This is a cool setup and a cool opportunity for me, for sure.
Yeah, man, I appreciate you coming on. From the people I've talked to, I've heard nothing but great things. So I'm excited to dive into this and get to know a little bit more about your story, what you do, and dive into anything basketball. So as we're getting started, just give everyone an idea of who you are and what you do and a rough idea of how you got into what it is that you're doing currently.
Sure. Well, my name, as you guys can see, is Matt Pugh, and I am a former high school and college basketball coach. I currently am still teaching at the high school level, but I was a high school coach for 11 years and then did the junior college level for 2 years as well. And so 13 years of kind of the traditional coaching role. And I always enjoyed my favorite part of coaching all the time was always the off season. And so that's where I kind of gravitated toward, which naturally kind of led me into now where I do player development with teams, with area players from my area, with the exception of this year, obviously with this summer. Usually in the summer, do quite a bit of traveling, running team camps and team events for programs throughout the country. And this last year started to get into some consulting as well with several high school and college programs, which was a ton of fun.
Awesome. So I'm curious, what does the consulting look like? Like how does that differ from your typical like skills training and what you would normally do?
Sure. This last year, there was a learning curve for me this last year for sure, because it was my first year kind of offering it. But I really left it up to, the coach in terms of what they wanted from me. Kind of the approach that I took was, I know the challenges, and not everybody and not every program is blessed to have, a budget where they can afford another assistant coach on staff. Yeah. And so basically what I kind of wanted to do was be able to fill a gap and be able to have a coach delegate some of the things that maybe they weren't great at, or maybe didn't have time to dive into as deep as they'd like, and give that and put that on my plate for them. And through that, tons of conversation, tons of back and forth, whether that be, scout film, do self scouts. A lot of times we would do, coach may want me to do a film breakdown for, maybe their sixth man or, off the bench. That usually doesn't get a ton of individual attention, but put that on my plate, where I can just do that and not have to be, do 100 different other things that you have to do as a coach, throughout the season. There's a lot of things that for anybody that out there that's listening or watching that is a current coach, as one of my biggest frustrations as a former coach myself was always, I was doing so many things other than what I wanted to do, which was basketball. Yeah. There's so many other things that go into running a program that you kind of get lost in the daily checklist of everything that has to get done, that you find yourself doing a lot of things that you don't necessarily love to do and weren't the reasons why you got into coaching.
For sure. It was that kind of part of the reason why there was a shift from more like the traditional coaching route to what you're doing now, as far as like the skills coaching and consulting.
100%. It just became like I said, I was doing so many things that didn't align with the reasons why I got into coaching, which was, the development of people and players, and being able to consistently help them. I know that every state's a little bit different, but I grew to become so frustrated with the, contact day limits, you can only have be with your players for, 25 days or 20 days in the off season. And then I just felt so handcuffed by those things. And it was just extremely uncomfortable and unnatural for me, where I just felt like, why I didn't understand the purpose in why are we holding people back if they want to put in the work and get better. And so, that just kind of naturally kind of gravitated towards this.
Awesome, man. Well, before we dive into like what your approach is with skills training currently, I'm curious, like growing up, did you always want to go into basketball, or was there something else you wanted to do when you were growing up and something like a switch flip when you were playing or started to coach? Or was it always like, I want to be in basketball somehow, some way?
Right. Yeah. I always wanted to, growing up, I always wanted to play at the collegiate level, and and I didn't really care what level that was, whether it was, NAIA, D1, D2, D3, whatever it was. I didn't get fixated on that. It was just that I wanted to be a college basketball player, and I was fortunate enough to be able to, work my tail off and earn my way, to achieving that. So, and then once that was over, it was like, I had to figure out a way to just stay involved with the game. So that's why ultimately I decided to go into education and teaching and coaching.
Love it. Now, looking at what you're doing currently, like how would you describe your approach to skills training? Obviously a very broad question that can go a lot of different areas, but overall, like as your elevator pitch, what is your approach to skills training for basketball?
Well, and it's changed.
For sure.
As I think that, with any of us, I think that as you do things longer, you learn and your points of view and your perspective changes, I think. But, kind of what I've really been trying to lock in on, over the last probably, year or so has been, I don't think that there's enough people out there that are taking the approach of and understanding the difference between training and working out. I think there's a massive difference in the two, and it's not that one is better than the other, because there's definitely a place for workouts. And workouts are a piece, I think, or can be a piece of training. But training, in my mind, and for me and my approach, takes a holistic view and involves, periodizing, a holistic plan. And I think as a season or as a calendar year goes around, and you'll probably appreciate this coming from the nutrition side, is like, I don't think that enough people take that approach. It can't be the same 360.
Oh yeah, you said periodization, and like my antenna went up. I was like, oh, like where's this going?
Right. And so, and I think no different than nutrition. I think that players' games have to also have that approach if they're going to maximize, their abilities and natural, talent. And so that's really what I try to do, especially with individual clients. It's a little more challenging when you're running, kind of like an academy setting where you have, 15 to 20 players for 8 weeks, and it's either, once a week or twice a week. And maybe it's like currently right now we're in the preseason phase. So like, that's a little bit different to periodize those kids and those players, kind of training than it is if you have a kid or a player, year round, because what they do in season is going to looks totally different than what they do, postseason, off season, preseason. And so I'm really trying to lock in on that, and really kind of try to provide that approach, because I think there's a gray space there that I don't think a lot of players get exposed to in terms of teaching and going over their development in that way.
Awesome. No, I love that. And definitely, and we'll dive into some nutrition stuff later, but periodization is something that's huge, and also something that in nutrition, a lot of people just skip over and think that eating healthy is enough, but we'll get into that later.
Right. Yeah. I'm anxious to hear your thoughts on all of that, just because I can learn a ton from you tonight as well.
Awesome, man. Well, in terms of that periodization for training, obviously this is going to depend greatly on the individual player, what their needs are, what their strengths and weaknesses are. Excuse me. But in a general sense, what does that periodization typically look like from in season to off season to preseason and so on and so forth?
Right. I think in season it becomes a lot more focused. Everything gets really, really fine tuned and narrow, because I think that, and everybody knows this, but we're going to spend the vast majority of our time working on the things that they do in games. And in season, it's a lot easier in season to identify what those things are, because you're in season, you've got film of, Tuesday night's game, and we've got a quick 45-minute session on Thursday, so we can take Tuesday night's game, or the last 2 weeks games, and be able to paint a pretty good picture of where are you getting touches, how are you getting those touches? Is that spot up? Is it off of screens? Is it live dribble scenarios? Is it ball screen action? Is it post ups? Is it high post flash? I mean, there's a million different things, obviously.
Yeah.
But so in season, it looks a lot like that. I also think that in season, and this is something that I've just recently picked up that I really like, is I think that as skills coaches and player development people, it's very easy, I think, to at times overdo it, based on, and it's hard though, because you have to have an understanding of what those players are doing in practice, because I do think that there's a fine line in overdoing, something where, if they're spending 30 minutes of their practice, doing shots off of curls, and that's what they do in games, they get a ton of those in games. Well, we might be better served at doing what kind of falls under that. If curls are their most, used action, and the area and the action that they give most of their shots from, then they're getting a ton of that already in practice. So let's take now, what's that next action? Are they also getting, spot ups from the corner that, they've missed a handful of open ones that they probably should have made? That may be where we need to live for that week, and so again, it's really being in tune and having really good communication skills.
Yeah.
And knowing what your players are doing, not only in games, but also in practice. So you're not just beating a dead horse.
Yeah.
So, and sorry, that went on a little tangent there and got off track, but that
was great.
Yeah. And then, so in season then now moves to, postseason. I think
before we get into postseason, how often, do you have good communication between you and the high school coach or the college coach, or is it often relying on what the player is telling you that they're doing in practice? How often do you end up in a situation where there's actually that communication? Because in nutrition,
right,
for me, the perfect world scenario is if I'm in touch with the skills trainer, I'm in touch with the strength and conditioning coach, I know what's going on, I know how we can actually tailor that. But oftentimes that just doesn't really happen.
Right. It does fall apart more than you want it to, for sure. Yeah. But I really try to continue to reach out though.
For sure.
Even if I haven't heard back, or even, whatever happens, how life happens. And, coaches have, they're not just a basketball coach. They're, they're a husband, they're a dad, they're, they're 100 different other things. They're a teacher, they're in the classroom, they have those responsibilities as well. And so I understand and get it, when things get busy, and it does kind of fall apart and life happens. But more than I originally anticipated, really do try and make a concerted effort, as long as, you know, you can't just sit back and wait for them to reach out to you and be like, well, hey, I'm doing this for, you know, I'm working with your kid. Don't you want your player to, you know, get the most out of, you know, everything that they're doing and invest the time in? Well, yeah, but you still have to, you know, kind of you've got to, on the front end, you know, put yourself out there and start that, you know, communication. Parents are always really good about reminding their kids, you know. So I at numerous times, you know, if I don't hear back, or, you know, think that they really need something, you know, then I'll, you know, hit mom, dad up or whatever, and that usually helps, you know, because I think the hard part with all of it is, especially like for me, the vast majority of my clients that I work with are high school age players. And then I do have, you know, a handful of area college players, and they're better, obviously, but like getting high school aged, you know, players to adhere to anything, you know, I can only imagine. I would love at some points and during this, you know, conversation, I would love to hear some of your tactics.
Absolutely.
You know, at getting kids to adhere, you know,
trying to figure that one out.
Right. Nutritionally, I mean, I can only imagine. But yeah, I mean, it's just you just can't get defeated. You know, I think it's that whole approach of, hey, every no I get, I'm just one step closer to a yes.
Exactly.
You know, that type of thing. You know, every no response I get, I'm one step closer to a response. So yeah, it's you just have to be constant with it. You just have to be committed to it, like anything else.
Definitely. Now, moving into the postseason side of things, how do things typically change there? Like, are you dialing it down a little bit? Like, depending on, obviously, if the player logged heavy minutes throughout the season, probably dial it down a little bit. Like, what's your approach there in the postseason?
For sure, yeah. Depending on the player, but you know, like for instance, I had a college player that averaged like 36 minutes a game last year for an entire college season, and that's a ton of minutes. Yeah. So like he literally, like I literally gave him a month off. Like I did not see him on the court with a ball or anything for over a month, you know, for 4 weeks. Now, during that 4 weeks, it wasn't just no communication 4 weeks throughout that time. And then obviously, you know, depending on what the player, you know, like you said, how many minutes did they play? What was their role? All these different things play a factor into, you know, how long do we go before we get back into the, you know, swing of things. But at minimum, regardless of how many minutes they played, at minimum, it's 2 weeks at minimum. Yeah. Like I want them not to go into a gym for 2 weeks. And even that is really short. And there's only been a handful of players that I've, you know, dealt with that were 2 weeks. Almost everybody is at least 3 or 4. And during that time is kind of where we start the process of identifying what we want to work on and what we want to improve in the off season, you know? And so postseason is a lot of, it's a lot more communication and a lot more, you know, face-to-face interaction than it is actually working on, you know, whatever they're wanting to add to their game. It's a lot of planning and a lot of identifying, you know, hey, what are these things that you want to achieve, you know? And we go through a whole, you know, SWOT analysis where we go through strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats. You know, I've got that technique from Drew, obviously from being around him for, you know, numerous years now. And so, but that's been a good way to go about planning now and off season, you know, moving from postseason to off season. But off season is a lot more about their, you know, their body, you know, to be honest with you. it's still getting, there are like we do tons of shooting in the postseason where it's
For sure.
low impact, not a ton of stress on their body, but at the same time, continuing to keep repetition and continuing to keep their confidence level at, a height where they can maximize results and be really confident going into, their off season.
Awesome. No, I think the postseason section is probably one of the most overlooked sections is in general across sports, like even outside of basketball. Because everyone wants to go straight from like season's over, now the grind starts. And it's a good problem to have because I'd rather someone be that type of person than the type of person who not want to do any work the entire offseason.
Right.
But it is something you definitely got to take into consideration. And I mean, I wish I knew this stuff when I was playing because I was the kid who just like season's done.
Right. Now go right back into it for sure. For sure. Yeah. And
how hard is it to actually implement the postseason phase? Like given obviously right now with AAU and like COVID and stuff, it's a little different. But in a typical scenario, how hard is it to actually implement a dedicated like postseason? You're recovering for the next 2 to 4 weeks when you have like AAU teams oftentimes starting up before the high school season's even done.
Right. And that's a hard one because it's, as you said, I think the postseason is where players start to get pulled in a lot of different directions. And I've never been one to, say, hey, you should think about, not playing, this spring on, the AAU circuit or the AAU level. I'm always for them, playing and competing. I think that competing gets lost, at times, but in our current state, I also think that it gets watered down too. Where they're playing so much at times, where it loses its impact a little bit. It loses its effect in terms of true, competition and winning and losing, and it matters and all those things. But yeah, the off season the postseason is always a tough one because that's when they start getting pulled in a ton of directions, and what you thought was gonna, they thought they were gonna be able to be in the gym, 2 or 3 times a week, but now they've got, practice that they've got to drive to, Kansas City from, Hannibal, which is all the way across the state of Missouri, they've got to go right. Yeah. So they've got to go to Kansas City for, practice on, Friday night or Saturday, and Saturday. And then the next weekend they're in, Dallas for a tournament. And, and so it just turns into a mess and trying to juggle that with school and then performance training and all those different other things. Like it's a real challenge.
Yeah, I bet it's just, there's a lot going on for sure. Now something I want to dive into with you is just going over like what advice would you give to basketball players who are kind of looking for a trainer right now? Like when you're looking for a trainer who's the right fit for you, it's actually going to genuinely help you out and put you in the best position to succeed. How would you go about that process? Is there anything to look out for, anything to be aware of? What would you recommend?
I think that, I think it starts with what do you, as a player, like, what do you want? I think that any trainer worth their, or skills coach or player development person, whatever term you want to use, I think any of them worth their salt will ask this question. And this is a question that I didn't ask enough early on in my skills coaching career, which is, and I even do this now from session to session, like, from training session to training session, I even do this. I'll have a plan going into that, but I think that all of them will ask you as a player this question, and that is, what do you want to get accomplished? Like, what do you want to get done? And I think almost as importantly, this question never gets asked is, how do you want to feel when you're done? Like, do you want to feel more, confident? Do you want to feel more skilled? Do you want to, there are 100 kids, players have 100 different reasons for deciding to work with a coach. And I'll tell you, like, that's been a huge help to me recently in the last probably 6 months. Is I've really been trying to, before our sessions, ask players, like, all right, hey, I've got my own opinions here and I've got a plan for today, but what do you want to get out of this today? And I think that gives you an opportunity to kind of check the temperature of the room a little bit, especially for them and where they're at today. I think that we always try to, it's very easy, and I know it is for me, to have this plan and be really rigid in that plan. And we're going to do this come hell or high water. Don't care. Don't give a crap about what you feel. This is what we need to do because this is what you said, needs to happen. You wanted this role and you wanted, to play this many minutes, and you didn't want to be, the first, 4-man off the bench. You wanted to be a starting 2 guard this year. So there's this laundry list. There's this checklist of things we got to do. Right. But what that has done is it has allowed me to give them an opportunity to speak, and gives me a chance to see where they're at today and what changes I might need to make to the plan before we ever even start, before frustration sets in, before they start going through the motions because they're, stressed about whatever that we may not know about. There are 100 different things, stuff might be going on at home that we don't know about, there's 100 different things. They should, they could have had a bad day with, their boy pissed them off today, or, if girls, get in arguments at school and what have you. But that's been a question that when I look back on it, I think that if my kid was looking to get involved and use the services of a skills coach or player development coach, that would be a question that I would hope that would be discussed. And then, like I said, do they respond, do you respond as a player to the only way you feel like you get better is if you're drenched in sweat all the time and like about to pass out? Well, then you probably won't mesh well with a guy that at times takes a slower approach, that breaks a lot of things down and is, teaching, more mental side of the game and those types of things. If you're somebody that is totally cool with that, then what's the big picture? Do we have a plan? And really, I think what I just said really is probably the overarching big thing for me is, does the person that you're choosing to work with, do they have an actual plan for you? Like, is there a real plan here, or is it, hey, come to these sessions, we're gonna grind, we're gonna work, and the intensity level is going to be this and that, and the 100 different things, ways to sell it, but are we working towards something here, and are we doing things that we're actually going to do in games? I think you see a lot of that, and there's a lot of back and forth on that.
Basketball skills trainer beef is some of the most entertaining beef to keep track of on Twitter.
Right. And so, you see enough of that, but I do lean towards the, obviously, like, maximize this kid's time, you know,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
they're not there for, you know, your likes, you know, and your retweets, you know. As a matter of fact,
Yeah.
like I think I just posted one yesterday, maybe. It was like a super simple, you know, drill that we were working on, you know, playing as a screener, which is not a sexy thing to work on by any means. You know,
what
like,
do you mean, man? Kids love to work on setting screens.
Right. Like no kid is signing up for your, you know, academy because they absolutely love, like, I can't wait to be a better screener, you know? So, you know, so I obviously didn't put that out there for a crap ton of likes or anything like that, but it's just a different angle that I think people can at least, you know, think about. So.
Yeah, no, now that I think about it, like it's kind of like if I were to spend every minute of a coaching session with a client on their nutrition talking about what supplements they're using. It's like maybe there's a use to it in certain contexts in like an obscure situation, but most of the time it's not really going to do all that much.
Right. Especially when you're talking about, you know, aligning it, you know, having a plan and aligning that with their goals, you know, and what that player wants / needs.
Yeah, no, I love it. And something I found really impressive when I was doing my research on you was that crazy transformation that you made. So first of all, congratulations. That's really awesome. And secondly, at what point did nutrition and kind of taking care of your body like come into the picture? Was it always something you kind of paid attention to, or was there something that kind of made that switch flip? It was like, oh, this is kind of important. I should probably start learning more about this.
Right. Well, this is going to sound really like, it probably sound really stupid, to be honest with you, but the switch for me, you know, and I was a athlete growing up my whole life. And so like, I could always eat whatever, you know, burn it off and what, you know, I was always like this super, you know, I was the typical hard gainer, you know, kid, super small and scrawny, you know, and like lifted all, you know, tried to lift all the time and like could never put on size at all.
Yeah.
And so, so what happened was, it was like this winter, it was like around the holidays or something like that. It might have been first part of January. And we have 2 daughters. And so my oldest daughter, who's 14, she was 13 at the time. And we were in the kitchen. We were in the kitchen, and I came downstairs and had my shirt off, and I was like cooking or something. I was in the kitchen fixing food or something, and we were talking about she's super active, and she's you know, does a great job and works her tail off, and you know, she's just now kind of starting to get into, you know, lifting and things like that, and getting stronger and stuff like that. And so she's gaining a little bit of confidence because she's seen some gains and some strength gains and stuff. And so she starts talking a little bit of trash, and she was like, Dad, please. She goes, you don't have abs, you have flabs.
Oh.
And so like when your firstborn child tells you that to your face, like for some reason it hit me different. And so, and so like that was for whatever reason, like that was the switch for me. And I know that doesn't work because I didn't have any, you know, a bunch of medical issues or anything like that. I mean, you know, like I had cancer, you know, like 10 years ago. So I, you know, that, but that never played a role in like, even when I was done with that, like and I wasn't, you know, like morbidly obese or anything, but definitely, you know, needed to lose a few. And so, that was the switch, you know, that was the switch for me. And then when she said that, I was like, God dang, like you know, two of the people in my life that I value their opinion and how they view me are my girls, you know, and I want to, you know, at least be the guy that looks like he can still get on the court and
Yeah.
looks like he can still get on the field and handle his own, even if my, tendons and joints and stuff are beat up from so many years of, training and doing stuff, as I'm learning now for sure. But yeah, that was my thing. And it's helped me a ton in a lot of different ways. I've learned a ton, as you can probably imagine, when you totally change, just from intuitively eating to, tracking your macros and getting those set up and making sure they're right. And then, gradually dialing those back and going through a pretty strict, calorie restriction, not crazy, but this was the first time that I've actually done it and done it the right way. And, learned a ton through the process, and it's been a lot of fun.
Awesome. That's super cool. Has that translated over? Have you been talking about that with like your kids that you're working with? Does that come up at all? And I'm curious, like what's been like the craziest thing you've seen a kid pull out of a bag to have this snack, like after a training session or before a training session?
I haven't, outside of the norm of like, smashing a Mountain Dew or something stupid like that, like right before, but those are usually like younger kids, that won't be like our academy kids. That'll be like if we do like a 1-day event where it's like a 1-day camp or something like that, where we're, in there for, 3 or 4 hours or whatever it is. But, so nothing like super crazy, but the one thing that I have noticed is that I think there are a lot, in my opinion, and you'll know better, but so I'd love to hear your take on this.
For sure.
I see what I believe a lot of players under eating, like they don't eat enough.
Please tell them. I've been trying.
They just don't eat enough. Like there'll be kids that are, and it's not always, I don't always under eating or not fueling their body, before a workout isn't always the reason that they're sluggish in a workout. They could just be like sleep or stress or 100 different other things. But I have, started to understand that they just, and it's obviously, as you can imagine, much more popular in girls. The girls that I train, like they totally undereat. Like they have no clue, what they should be eating, like how much they should be eating, what kinds of stuff I err on the side of like, all right, before we even talk about what you're eating, I just need you to eat. Like, let's just figure that one out first. Like quit being, petrified of food and being scared of eating. But just under eating and under fueling their body, it has been a shocker to me a little bit, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I could probably count on one hand the amount of players that have come to me that I've worked with that have actually been eating anywhere close to the amount of calories that they need to be eating. Like 95+% of the time, it's constant under eating. And it makes sense. As basketball players, you burn a ton of calories, and especially considering everything these kids are doing now with skills training, AU, team practices, weight room sessions, extra work they're doing on their own. They're not telling you about. Like there's so many factors that go into it that contribute to that. Not to mention most hoopers, especially at higher levels, tend to be a bit taller, and as a result tend to be a bit heavier. So that has the calorie burn. So it's pretty hard unless you're actively paying attention to it to actually eat enough as a basketball player. And that's why, you mentioned tracking macros. There's a lot of people that aren't a big fan of it for whatever reason, but I think it's a helpful tool. I think when you do it incorrectly, you try to be too strict with it, it can be a little bit stressful. But overall, it's a good education tool. I don't think that people need to be doing it forever, nor should they. Right. But just so they understand, okay, this is what 4,000 calories looks like. I do need to eat 4,000 calories. Like this is more than I imagined.
Yeah, and 4,000 calories is a ton. Like that's a lot of food. If you're, if you're not smashing a double quarter pounder at lunch and 2 freaking, bacon, egg, and cheese biscuits at McDonald's.
Yeah.
Stuff like, that then it adds up very, pretty quickly. But, and then I also think, like their time constraints, it makes it extremely difficult for them to get enough calories in as well, especially now, like, we're going back into school now. So, throughout the day, it's just, it's so hard for them to get the amount of calories that they need. And, half of them don't wake up, until 45 minutes before they have to be at school. So they're definitely not getting a breakfast in. And I'm not one to say that, like, you have to eat breakfast. Like, some people just don't like breakfast, and that's okay. But you're going to have to make up those calories somewhere. And, being able to figure that out, I think is a tough one.
Yeah, no, I'm 100% on board with that one. I don't think breakfast is this magical meal. I mean, there have been studies that have shown that some markers of performance are improved when you have breakfast, or on average, they tend to be improved with that. Usually, like you said, is probably just a result of them eating enough calories overall versus skipping breakfast and falling 500 calories short at the end of the day. So 100% agree with you. But I think, and I know you asked me about this earlier, just to go back to that question of, like, how do you get people to stick to this? I think it just comes down to keeping it crazy simple. The vast majority of players do not care to track mac. I'm a fan of tracking. I just said that, but a lot of times I don't start there. The vast majority of people really shouldn't start there. No. Really, I think a lot of players would benefit from just eating 4 meals a day. Like, just consistent. I don't care what you eat at those meals. It could be the quarter pounder for all I care. Just eat 4 times in a day. And when you get that down consistently, then let's look at, okay, are you getting a protein source in? Are you getting a carbohydrate source in? Some veggies, some healthy fat? Go through that checklist. I know you got the PN search. You know what I'm talking about there. But just going through like that, those basics, and really that's farther than the vast majority of players will ever get. But if you just get that down, it could massively change how you perform. And add on top of that, hydration.
Right. Yeah. No, I didn't like, I was blown away at the, just the difference it's made, in just how I feel every day. My energy levels are way better. So I'll ask you a question here, if you don't mind. What is your process when starting with a player addressing nutrition? Is it like how do you start that process? Like how do you, like, is it based on, their goals? I'm sure plays a little bit into it, but like, how do you start that conversation?
Yes. I mean, in terms of starting the conversation, I think my position is a little bit biased because most of the players I'm working with already have some interest in working on their nutrition. So, I mean, they're seeking me out to work on it. So, but in terms of like how I get that going, the first thing first, like we talked about earlier with training, you got to figure out what do you even want to achieve. Because a lot of times players think they're eating healthy and their diet is good. But if you look at it, they're actually doing the exact opposite of what they need to be doing to achieve the goal that they actually want to achieve. Right. So a lot of times when you tend to eat healthier, those foods aren't like, they're not going to lead to you eating a lot of calories. They're typically going to lead to you eating less calories, which is the opposite of what we want to be doing. So even though in theory it sounds good, like, oh, I'm eating clean. I cut out all the processed food. I cut out all carbs. By the way, please, if anyone's listening to this, do not cut out carbs. Like, there's no situation as
my gosh, right. Carbs are not instant fat.
Oh my God. There are so many nutrition pet peeves that we can go down. But that's probably the biggest one. If people just understood they have to eat enough calories, eat enough carbohydrates, they'd be in a good place. But yeah, really, it's just it comes down to figuring out, okay, what goal you're trying to achieve, and then just working from there. Because if we don't know what the goal is they're trying to achieve, it's impossible to build out an effective plan.
Do you see more players coming and reaching out to you wanting to gain weight or lose weight?
In work with basketball players, most of them want to gain weight.
Yeah, that would have been my assumption, but I was curious.
Most of them want to gain weight. I think a lot of people think they need to gain a lot more weight than they actually do, though. Like people will come to me saying, "Oh, I want to gain 20 pounds this off season." I'm like, you realize what 20 pounds will feel like on you at the end of this off season.
You're not going to move the same way you move now, 20 pounds heavier. Like even with proper like performance training, like you're going to move differently.
Yeah, absolutely. I've had a couple players make that sort of transformation. I think just because they're growing and like going through like just general growth and development. Sure. So it's not all like muscle mass they put on, but I mean, just the fact they're growing taller, they're going to be a little bit heavier. So, but I think those drastic transformations, and the media doesn't help with like these crazy before and after pictures you see of like pro athletes like doing these crazy transformations. It's like, the full context is not there. But
no, not at all.
Yeah. Awesome. I know we have a bunch of questions. I want to be respectful of your time. So let's go ahead and dive into some of these questions so we can get into some of those. Let's see. All right. This one's from Matthew's asking, what's the difference between a hip crank and a hip swivel?
So for me, hip crank is off of 1 foot. So like if the ball's in my right hand, my left foot's going to hit at the same time as the ball. And then I'm basically just going to like turn my toe out on my left foot, so I'm just kind of like a quarter turn almost. And then I'm just cranking open on that as I kind of toe tap on that left foot. Hip swivel is more off of 2 feet where I'm really closed, where I'm a really closed stance. And then now I'm just switching my feet. So if my left foot is forward, my right foot is back, now I'm going to pound. And then I'm just going to open up with now my right foot forward, my ball side foot forward, and my left foot back. That would be more of a hip swivel. And that's really the only, big difference. Hip crank is used a lot more in kind of where you're attacking a little bit more. Whereas hip swivel has a much more aggressive change of pace. If you can picture that, like hip swivel is really like you're stopping and then opening your hips up and then going. Whereas a hip crank, you're more just kind of it's more of a slow down instead of just a start stop. So cool. I hope that answers that question.
Awesome. Another question from Matthew. He's a regular here. I appreciate the support, Matty, asking all the questions. We'll dive into as many of them as we can.
Yeah.
But this next question is saying, would the read in a hard hedge for a ball screen be to split the pick and roll or drag out the big and go one-on-one?
For me, answering that question, it would depend on the positioning of the hard hedge. Is the hedge attached to the screener, or are they hedging out and separating from the screener? If there's separation from the screener, then split is a great option. If the hedge is attached, so if he's like our terminology would be if he's up to touch. So if I'm the hedge defender and my man is setting the screen, if I'm touching him, if I'm touching the screener and just hard hedging, while I'm touching, then you would drag that out, and what we would call is like a top pop, which would be very similar to, a hip swivel, just to kind of get around the hedge and then drag him out. So if there's space, split it. If no space, pop off and drag it out.
Awesome. And then next question we got is asking, how would you go about creating a skill development plan and a SWOT analysis for your players? As a high school player, would it be possible to self-diagnose myself and do a SWOT analysis for myself, or should I talk to a coach?
I think in a perfect world, you do both. And I think that if you have one and have coach have one, now you get together. Yeah. Now you can see if he or she, if coach views your game similarly as you. If it's not going to be perfect, it's not going to be exact, but I think if there's some similarities there, I think you're in a pretty good place. You know, you don't have an inflated view of yourself, you know, that's not realistic, or vice versa. You know, believe it or not, you do see some players that are like, I suck, I'm terrible, I'm trash, you know, and coach is actually like, hey, you do this well, you know, here's a strength, you know, here's a weakness. But if, for instance, like if you list things that are weakness, you know, that are strengths that coach sees as weaknesses,
I'm an ISO.
Need to have a conversation.
Day in, day out.
Right there, then we need to have a conversation, you know.
Yeah.
And coach will tell you why. Coach will tell you why he viewed that as it is. But I think that's a great approach, really, to be honest with you, and something that that I think more players need to do. Like that's a great question, Matt. I love that.
Awesome. In terms of that mental side of things, and with those players that tend to get a little bit more down on themselves, I think that's a lot more common than people think. Like I think.
Oh, 100%.
I think during my playing career, I tended to lean more towards that side. I think, like you said, is super common. So how do you go about helping a player like that kind of break out of that shell and kind of break that glass ceiling of like working super hard but not quite able to break through?
Okay, so ask that again, Tom.
So like, so for like a player who like works super hard in the gym, like constantly working, but just for whatever reason can't break through this like glass ceiling of like that potential, but they're working super hard. Like how do you break through there when like it's their mentality that's holding them back?
I think a lot of it is, to be honest with you, and some people might agree, some people might disagree, but a lot of that, in my opinion, is trial and error. You know, it's no different than like you take, you know, what, you know, the services that you provide, you know, from a nutrition perspective. Like you may prescribe this, and this, and let's do that, commit to that, and then let's evaluate. If we wanted to gain weight and we've done that for 3 weeks and there's been no movement in the scale at all, then we got to make an adjustment. You know, we got to go with, we've got to try a different process. And I think people are so scared to change things. They're like, you know, we get so, you know, and especially like, you know, I was guilty of this too. Like, you know, like trying to force myself or players down a certain path that may or may not be for them. So like, I just think you have to continually be willing to tweak things and change things. You know, it might be, you know, if you're doing stuff for, you know, like, let's say you're doing shooting drills with them and you're, you know, keeping track of makes, you're charting, or you're doing whatever it is you're doing. You know, maybe you're doing a drill and they have to get a certain score, and you know they're just not getting that score. A lot of times, it's really beneficial. What I found is to step away from the shooting stuff, do something totally different for a week, and then come back to the shooting stuff. And if it's a confidence thing, I think you have to get them into stuff that they're really good at. Yeah. So if they struggle from 3, but they finish at the rim really well, and we're spending 80% of our time on working, you know, from behind the arc, and they start to struggle, or they just can't get past X number of makes, or they can't get past X number of makes in a certain number of time. Well, then I think there's a lot of value then in, okay, let's take a step back for a week and do very minimal, or don't track the 3s in terms of makes, and come back for that week and track and get and do a deep quick dive in finishing around the rim.
Mm-hmm.
Because, I mean, confidence is a huge thing.
Oh, for sure.
And I think we can, it's very easy to stay on one thing in fear of, if I don't keep doing this, then I'm not going to get any better. It's no different, no different than the, performance side or nutrition side for you again. Like, I think there's a lot of parallels here where, like, take a refeed day, dude. Like, it's okay. You can't be in a deficit for a year. Like, that's not good. And vice versa. I also don't think it's great to, and I don't know how you feel about it, but I don't know that it's awesome to be in a 1,000 calorie surplus for 12 months either. Just for the sake of, I got to be in a surplus to gain weight. I mean, so that goes back to the whole periodizing thing, though.
Yeah, that framework really holds up. I mean, in training and in nutrition, for sure. Too much of anything for too long is usually not going to be a good look. So switching it up sometimes.
And one thing I've learned is people don't understand that all of those things are stresses.
Yeah.
All of those things are stresses. And I think a lot of people lose sight of that. I know I have, where I was just like, no, I just got to like work hard all the time. And if that's not good enough, that means I'm not working hard enough. So I need to work harder. and not understanding that always on the grind and always working harder, and adding another element of, okay, it's like, well, okay, I worked out for, my training session, you run into kids like this. I had a training session for an hour and I did that 3 days a week. And 2 weeks later, my scores or my results went down. So that means now I need to work an hour. And then when I go home from working with Matt, I need to go out in the driveway and go for another 45 minutes and add another stress onto. And so now you're not going to get results because you don't understand recovery and you don't understand that process of what it takes to see the result, which is time off, like time away from it. Like, that's where the results happen.
Yeah, that's the secret, man. I wish I knew that when I was playing.
Oh God, yes.
There are so many things that I wish I knew when I was playing when it comes to like recovery and nutrition, and just I'm so jealous of the kids nowadays. Like, they have so much access to so many really awesome resources, which is great. Like, nutrition related, performance related, skills training related, like everything just on the internet, which is awesome.
Yeah, and the hard part is getting them to understand that there's a line. And I think all of us, even coaches and teachers and everybody in society in general, I'm getting better at it, but I still suck, is like consuming so much with no action. Just trying to continually consume and like continually read. Like, I'm looking at 4 or 5 books right here, and it's like, I'm trying to read all of them, and like I'm trying to read because I have, you always hear like, hey, the most successful people in anything, they read more books, they do. So I'm like, okay,
wake up at 3 a.m.
Yeah, like, damn it, I better hurry up and start reading, so, but there again, I'm just, when you consume so much and consume with no application, you're just working to work and you're just spinning your wheels. You're not getting any better.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree with you there. And that can be applied pretty much anything in life, really.
Anything.
Yeah. Awesome. So just to wrap it up, we'll go ahead and answer one more question. This one's a deep one, but what's your purpose in life?
That is a deep one. I don't know if I'm going to answer this right, but I'm going to take the angle, instead of using the term purpose. I've gotten a little more clear in what I want from life, which I think is close to purpose. But, I want to help as many people as I can through the vehicles and with the relationships that I've been fortunate enough to develop and build and have. And I want to help them beyond, I want to help those people beyond their playing career and beyond whatever career they have. Like I want to help them past that point. And I want to be able to do that while also providing a lifestyle for my family that they want.
Love it. Love it. Well, Matt, I appreciate your time today. I really enjoyed this conversation. I learned a ton. I know everyone listening in learned a ton. And just as we're wrapping up, where can everyone keep up with what you have going on? Where's the best place to find you at?
All the kind of the major, social platforms. I say major for me. I'm starting to become an old guy now. So like some of the new stuff, I know about some of the new stuff just because I have
on TikTok.
Right. Because I have a 14-year-old and an 11-year-old at home. So
yeah.
I know about the stuff, but again, like I'm consuming too much stuff, guys. So I don't have time to create on 13 different platforms. But no, to answer your question, at Coach Matt Pugh on Twitter, on Instagram, and then Facebook, Matt Pugh, Pure Sweat Basketball. Those are kind of my three big ones where you can, find, pretty much anything that I'm talking about, and providing and opportunities that I have going on. Twitter, I use Twitter a lot for like just random like brain dump stuff that I might be thinking about, and Instagram, obviously you'll learn a ton about me. I don't use it as kind of a a specific kind of content on Instagram. I've got my dogs and my kids and basketball and nutrition and my weight room stuff and just different things I've got going on personally, and then all my basketball stuff, though basketball specific stuff, is all on my Facebook page.
Love it. Well, Matt, thanks again for coming on. And when I end the broadcast, stick around because it'll take us back into that lobby room before, so don't dip out of here just yet. But Perfect. For everyone tuning in, I appreciate you guys stopping by. Hopefully you enjoyed the episode, and I will see you guys soon.